My name is Cameron, and this is the story of the night that changed my life forever. It was a Friday night, and I had just left a party in a part of town I wasn't familiar with. I had rented an Airbnb nearby and, feeling a bit tipsy, I followed the directions on my phone to get back. The street was dark, and I was only half paying attention to where I was going. All I could think about was crashing into bed. When I reached the house, it looked just like the pictures. An old 2-story home with a wooden porch. The front door was unlocked, which I thought was strange, but I chalked it up to an absent-minded host. I stepped inside, and immediately something felt off. The air was thick with a musty smell, and the place was deadly quiet. The living room was dark, and the furniture was covered in a layer of dust so thick it almost looked like snow. Confused, I pulled out my phone to check the address. That's when I noticed the faint smell of decay. It was sickeningly sweet, like something rotting, but I couldn't place where it was coming from. I turned on my phone's flashlight and started to explore, thinking maybe the place hadn't been cleaned in a while. But as I walked further into the house, the smell grew stronger, and a sense of dread began to settle in my stomach. I wanted to turn around and leave, but my curiosity got the better of me. I opened a door at the end of a long hallway, and what I saw nearly made me vomit. There, in the middle of the room, were 3 bodies, 2 adults, and a child. They were bound and gagged, their skin pale and rotting. The room reeked of death. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was like something out of a nightmare, but it was real. Before I could react, I heard a sound behind me, a soft, creaking noise. I spun around and saw a man standing in the doorway, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He was holding a knife, its blade glinting in the dim light. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized what I had done. I had walked into the home of a serial killer. The man stepped closer, and I backed away, my mind racing. I knew I had to get out of there, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. Somehow, I managed to turn and sprint down the hallway, crashing through the front door and into the night. I didn't stop running until I reached the end of the street. I called the police, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial the number. When they arrived, I watched from a distance as they stormed the house and arrested the man. I couldn't bring myself to go back inside. The images of those bodies, the smell of decay, it was all too much. The police later told me that the man had been living there for months, luring unsuspecting victims into his home. The family I had found had been reported missing weeks earlier. I couldn't believe how close I had come to becoming another one of his victims. I haven't been the same since that night. The memory haunts me, and I can't shake the feeling of dread that washes over me every time I think about it. I'll never forget the terror I felt, the horror of what I saw, and I'll never make the mistake of walking into the wrong house again. My name is Eric, and I've always been fascinated by the internet. I spent countless hours browsing forums, chatting with strangers, and exploring the darker corners of the web. It was all just a game to me, until it wasn't. One night, out of sheer boredom, I stumbled onto a dark web forum where people shared stories of bizarre trades. It was filled with all sorts of wild claims and strange offers. I thought it was all just a sick joke, so I decided to join in. I posted an offer. I'll trade my life for $1 million. It was meant to be a joke, something to get a reaction. But a few minutes later, I got a response. Someone, using the name Watcher, replied, asking for my personal details. I laughed it off and ignored it, thinking it was just some troll playing along. But then things started happening. Little things at first. My door would be unlocked when I came home, even though I was sure I had locked it. I'd noticed cars parked outside my house that didn't belong there, just sitting with the engine running. And then there were the texts. Anonymous, of course, asking if I was ready. At first, I tried to brush it off. I told myself I was being paranoid, that it was all just a coincidence. But as the days went on, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. I felt like I was being hunted, like some invisible predator was always just out of sight. I went to the police, but they couldn't do much. The messages were untraceable, and the dark web was a labyrinth they couldn't navigate. They told me to be careful, to stay vigilant, but there wasn't much they could do without a clear threat. The stalking escalated. I'd come home to find things in my house moved around, as if someone had been inside while I was out. Once, I found a knife on my kitchen table, placed there deliberately. I started sleeping with a bat under my bed, too scared to turn off the lights. Then, one night, it happened. I was sitting in my living room, trying to calm my nerves by watching TV, when I heard a noise from the hallway. It was a soft creak, the kind that only happens when someone's trying to be quiet. My heart raced as I reached for the bat, my hands trembling. I called out, trying to sound brave, but my voice cracked with fear. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. I couldn't see his face, just the outline of his body as he moved toward me. He was holding something in his hand, something sharp and gleaming. I swung the bat, hitting him in the arm, but it didn't stop him. He lunged at me, and I felt a sharp pain in my side. I don't remember much after that. I must have blacked out because when I came to, the room was empty. The pain was excruciating, and I could feel the blood soaking through my shirt. I managed to drag myself to my phone and called for help. The police arrived quickly, but the man was gone. They never found him, and there were no leads to follow. It was like he had vanished into thin air, leaving nothing behind but the scars on my body and the fear in my mind. Now I live in constant terror, always looking over my shoulder, always wondering when he'll come back. I moved to a new city, changed my name, and cut all ties with my old life, but I can't escape the feeling that he's still out there, watching, waiting. My name is Kevin, and I've always considered myself a dedicated artist. I used to spend hours in my studio, absorbed in my work, finding solace in the quiet moments when the world faded away and it was just me and my canvas. But that peace was shattered when I met Jessica. Jessica first appeared at one of my gallery shows. She was just another admirer, a fan of my work who seemed genuinely interested in what I created. She was friendly, always offering compliments and encouragement. As a struggling artist, I appreciated her support. We started talking more, and I thought I had made a new friend. But then her admiration began to change. Jessica started showing up at my studio uninvited, often bringing gifts, flowers, homemade meals, art supplies. At first, I thought she was just being generous, but her visits became more frequent and her behavior more intense. She would stand too close, her eyes lingering on me in a way that made me uncomfortable. Then came the phone calls, at all hours of the day and night. She would call just to talk, but her tone became increasingly desperate. If I didn't answer, she would leave long, rambling voicemails, her words shifting from praise to something darker. I tried to distance myself, but she refused to let go. The messages she sent grew more unsettling. She wrote about how much she admired me, how we were meant to be together. When I ignored her, the tone turned menacing. "If I can't have you, no one will," she wrote. Those words haunted me, but I didn't know what to do. One night, after spending an evening with friends, I came home to find my front door slightly ajar. My heart raced as I stepped inside, the familiar scent of paint suddenly suffocating. I flicked on the lights and froze. My studio was a wreck. Paintings I had spent months working on were slashed to pieces, the canvas shredded and tossed around the room. The walls were splattered with red paint, and there, in the middle of the chaos, was a message scrawled in large, jagged letters. "If I can't have you, no one will." I felt a cold fear creep over me, my mind racing as I tried to comprehend what had happened. I knew it was Jessica, but the thought of her being in my home, invading my space, was too much to bear. I called the police, my voice trembling as I explained what I had found. When they arrived, they found Jessica outside, hiding in the shadows, watching my house. She was arrested, but the experience left me deeply shaken. The place that once brought me comfort now filled me with dread. I couldn't step into my studio without feeling her presence, the memory of her obsession hanging over me like a dark cloud. The safety and peace I had once known were gone, replaced by the chilling realization of how easily admiration could turn into something dangerous.